Hey, welcome back, everyone, and happy Labor Day to everyone as well. Yeah, it's good seeing y'all here. You might notice we are not broadcasting on our normal YouTube channels on either Crossroads or Crossroads Highlights. The reason is because YouTube gave us a strike, interestingly, on on a trailer for an old interview we did with Dinesh D'Souza about his documentary, which we can't even mention on YouTube now. So currently, we cannot post on our normal YouTube channel for 2 weeks because we have a strike. They gave us a strike for publishing a trailer for the interview we did with Dinesh D'Souza about his documentary, which I guess I can't even name on YouTube because YouTube has gone nuts, in my opinion. So, folks, those of you on YouTube, we're going to be broadcasting. Well, I guess if you're seeing this, you know. We're going to be broadcasting on the Epic TV YouTube channel for a little bit, and of course on Epic TV, of course, as always. So, thank you for being here, everyone. Another reminder why I'm glad we have Epic TV, so because they can't touch us here, right? All right, folks. I want to go over Biden's speech, and I'm sure many of you, maybe if you haven't watched clips of it, if at the very least you've probably seen some of the memes going around where Biden is speaking in front of this blood red and black background, and he's like this, and he's yelling, and there's people putting his photos side by side with Adolf Hitler, and there's all kinds of memes going around, and they're saying it's Dark Brandon is the meme that they're, that actually the Chinese came up with, that his team has somehow rolled with. It was very bizarre, but I want to dig into what his speech actually was suggesting, because I've watched what a lot of other podcasts and hosts were saying about it. I think my take's a little different than theirs over what the kind of the meaning of what Biden was talking about is. And I, of course, agree with them on several points as well. But I want to kind of give my take on what we just watched, because I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, I'll show you some clips and we'll go into it. It was bizarre. It was really, really bizarre. So we're going to talk about that today. Also, some updates on Trump, that Trump has said that he's going to, well, he is currently apparently supporting the defenses of some of the J6ers, legally helping them financially. But also he's saying he's going to pardon them, or at least suggesting he will pardon them if he retakes office. Folks, I want to detail all of this today, so that's it. Let's get started. Those of you as well, remember, if you're on YouTube and you can find this because we're not broadcasting on our normal channels, we will jump over exclusively to Epic TV after about 20-25 minutes. And YouTube just showed us why we need Epic TV, so come join us. Join the discussions. Again, I do about an hour and a half show usually, at least Monday through Wednesday, and then do our interviews on Thursday and Friday. And our interviews are so spicy that YouTube will retroactively lock our channel because they're so good. So be sure to check them out on Epic TV, especially the one they just banned, which was Dinesh D'Souza's interview. All right, folks, that said, let's go into this a bit. I want to start off by talking about kind of what Biden was talking about. Let me show you this. Let me show you the first one here. This is Breaking 911 on Twitter. Actually posted a video of it, and I want to show you a bit of what Biden was actually saying. Let me play you this clip, just to give you an idea of what the general gist was of what Biden was talking about. Let me bring this up.
But as I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault. We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise. So tonight, I've come to this place where it all began to speak as plainly as I can to the nation about the threats we face, about the power we have in our own hands to meet these threats, and about the incredible future that lies in front of us if only we choose it. We must never forget, we the people are the true heirs of the American experiment that began more than 2 centuries ago. We the people have burning inside of each of us the flame of liberty that was lit here at Independence Hall. A flame that lit our way through abolition, the Civil War, suffrage, the Great Depression, world wars, civil rights. That sacred flame still burns. Now in our time, as we build an America that is more prosperous, free, and just, that is the work of my presidency, a mission I believe in with my whole soul. But first, we must be honest with each other and with ourselves. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Now, I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans.
Now, folks, what is he saying here? Well, first of all, you might notice, he has this blood red lighting and this black and red imagery, which a lot of people have compared to like Hitler and Nazis or Man in the High Castle or to like Star Wars and the speech they gave with these black uniforms and the red background, or if you're talking about like V for Vendetta with the black and red, it's a very strange choice. He's speaking in front of Independence Hall in Pennsylvania, where the Declaration of Independence was written, and the whole idea of American freedom and what we stand for was kind of framed. And in his speech, he's talking about equality and democracy. We're not first of all a democracy, we're a republic, which I found it interesting. He actually says a threat to our republic, which I wonder if that was a slip up on his part. But he's talking about he's talking about democracy, mob rule, essentially the idea that the Democrats really founded on, which even George Washington was very much against, and most of the founding fathers are very much against. The idea of democracy, of course, being like essentially you get a group of people, they can kind of do whatever they want. Essentially, that was always the idea. It was an anti-constitutional movement that George Washington viewed as a threat to the Constitution. In fact, the Democrat societies, which did exist in the time of Washington, were viewed as very radical societies, very much in line with the French Revolution. And what Biden is invoking is more so the French Revolution than the American Revolution, standing in front of Independence Hall, where the ideas that framed the justification for the American Revolution came about. Now, Biden's talking about equality and democracy, which is not the American idea of liberty and freedom and constitutionally protected values. What he's talking about instead is very much the French Revolution model: equality, fraternity, liberty. Meaning again that liberty and fraternity are, as many people pointed out, are contradictory to each other. You can't be both free and forced to conform to an equal system, right? Without sacrificing one or the other, which was always one of the big contradictions within the French system that led to, of course, the reign of terror, the guillotine, and the de-Christianization movement in Europe. Now, what else is he really talking about here? He's talking about really a movement to crush, it seems, the MAGA Republicans, as he's framing them. And he's specifically saying this is about the quote, threats we face. The threats we face. And that threat he's describing is what he calls the MAGA Republicans. And then he goes on to say the power we have in our hands to meet those threats. The power we have in our hands to meet those threats. What power does he have in his hands to meet the threat, and what is the threat? He's saying using the force of government, the power of his administration, the power of maybe the legal system, the FBI, and so on, to meet maybe even the Marines who are flanking him, to meet those threats. And the threat he's describing is not Al-Qaeda, it's not ISIS, it's not the Mexican drug cartels, it's not the Chinese Communist Party. The threat he's talking about is the domestic threat of MAGA Republicans. Now, my take on this is what he's doing is trying to destroy the MAGA movement, and I think that's a very just kind of on the surface obviously what he's saying, because he's saying it directly. But it appears that what he's trying to do is drive a wedge between the ideas of the MAGA movement under Trump and how Trump changed the Republican Party, this new Republican Party that is a really very different from what the old establishment, George Bush era Republicans were. And he's trying to support the normal establishment Republicans, the Rhinos, the Bushes, those guys, right? He wants to roll things back, it seems. This is my interpretation, that he's trying to kind of roll back the political system in America between the Republicans and the Democrats back to the way it was before Trump was even a political figure, back to the George Bush Republicans and the Hillary Clinton and Clinton Democrats. That's the idea I think he's trying to bring things back to. And that being said, I think there's a real agenda behind this that he's making very clear, which he's trying to frame the MAGA movement, the Trump movement, as being a type of extremism, as being something that is not only, I think, contrary to the ideas of democracy that he's framing, but also even going as far as saying it's a threat to the very republic. And he's saying he plans to use the power we have in our hands, to meet these threats. And that's the exact quote, the power we have in our hands to meet these threats, i.e. the threat of the MAGA movement. Folks, I'm going to go deeper into this. First, though, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by Secure. Over 155 million Americans are affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over the year. People get anxious because they can't protect their online data and activity. But now there's a new email and messenger app called Secure. That's Secur. That can give privacy and security for sending emails and messages. Secure's server and data center are hosted in Switzerland, which has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. Secure does not rely on big tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which means it's not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. Secure does not ask for your phone number, does not mine your data, or upload your contacts. It functions by adding people you know, then adding their secure numbers. And you can still chat with non-secure users by sending them an invite. Secure protects you from hackers getting onto your phone. You also have privacy while you're on the app. Now it's $5 for the messenger, $7 for the email, and only $10 for the email and messenger package. You can visit secure.com today for a free 7-day trial, or use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring today's episode. Now, I want to go further into this because the important part that I think needs to really be addressed is the fact that this is not just Joe Biden's policy. What you're watching with this isn't just Biden. It wasn't, in my belief, it was not Biden, staying up late and writing down his speech saying, "Oh, the MAGA Republicans are an enemy against the American Republic and go against the ideas of democracy and equality that we want to, expound." Biden was not the one doing this. At least I really don't think that was the case. What you're watching is a statement by the people and the system behind Biden. The people behind Biden and the agenda that they plan to roll out. The system that's behind Biden, the ones who decided to make this blood red and dark black background, that was not just something random. Somebody came up with that. Somebody decided to put big red lights on Independence Hall and frame it like that. Someone decided to design it so he was flanked by 2 Marines as he gave this incredibly divisive and really, frankly, you want to talk about real domestic terrorism, that's inciting terror among it's inciting terror domestically, declaring half of the country as the enemies of the system, the enemies of the republic. You want to talk about real domestic terrorism, what he just said is domestic terrorism in its purest form. Somebody planned that. Somebody designed that. Somebody organized that. And then a group of people very likely agreed on that. And Biden's speech, declaring kind of where the country is and what the agenda of his regime is going to be doing, determined that the agenda is really to address a domestic extremist threat, and a threat that's not, again, a foreign threat, a threat that's not China, that's not, Al-Qaeda, that's not the open borders, that isn't inflation or gas prices or anything that I think most Americans care about. The threat against the system, the threat against, domestic stability is his political enemies. And what he's declared is essentially the use of his system, right? The tools we have in our hands to meet these threats, the use of the political system that he's, again, the executive branch at the very least, that he's in control of, to address those threats. The threat being MAGA, the Make America Great Again movement. And Trump especially. This is not just Biden saying this. This is the system behind Biden making a declaration that that is what they intend to do. Now, I want to show you a bit more about that system behind him, because what they've been trying to frame is a narrative that makes MAGA appear extreme. And let me show you this. This is Washington Examiner. They said Biden's ultra MAGA attack. Remember, for a while, Biden was saying the ultra MAGA, the great MAGA king. He's talking about Trump, right? The great MAGA king and his followers. The idea of ultra MAGA, that slogan, again, was not just Biden coming up with that on a whim. That was a system behind him. The system behind him framed that. And there was some stories on this, actually. They spent 6 months trying to frame that. It took them 6 months to come up with the label Ultra MAGA. Washington Examiner was one of the many media that reported this. It said this: Biden's Ultra MAGA attack is product of 6-month study led by Anita Dunn. And further in the story, it says this: the origins of the attack go back further. For 6 months, Democratic messaging guru Anita Dunn and the Center for American Progress Action Fund oversaw an effort to discern Republicans' weak spot, according to the Washington Post. So, again, this is political warfare, right? And they're trying to frame their political enemies as extremists as part of that political warfare campaign, trying to frame the people who oppose them as being extreme. They spent 6 months. They hired Anita Dunn and the Center for American Progress Action Fund to create this narrative of ultra MAGA. And it says Dunn, a longtime Biden advisor, returned in May to the White House in a senior advisor role, the third time since the start of the president's term, 3 times. Now, during that, MAGA, the group's survey and focus groups found, stood out in battleground areas for its negative ties. So they wanted to use MAGA, Make America Great Again, as the term that they identified, right? Because they identified MAGA, it says, in their surveys, because they were conducting surveys in battleground states. They determined that that was the divisive word, the word that could maybe win them elections, right? And so in their focus groups, they found out that it had negative connotations. So how do you take a negative connotation and make it bigger? Well, you frame it as being more extreme, is what they decided to do. Although I'd argue that they're probably going to have the opposite effect by going to such an extreme, ironically, going to an extreme in framing it. It says the slogan intended to malign Trump, however, remember, ultra MAGA, people ended up kind of liking it. And so a lot of Trump supporters ended up making hats that said ultra MAGA. A lot of them thought it was a cool sounding phrase. And so it had the opposite effect, where it kind of galvanized Trump supporters, ironically. Now, on this, Fox News had another article around this, and it said Biden's new ultra MAGA label came after 6 months of liberal-funded focus group research, according to a report. And further in their article says this. They say the ultra MAGA messaging came from a 6-month research project from liberal, again, right, this Anita Dunn and her group. The polling and focus group research by Hart Research and Global Strategy Group. Biden brought in all these groups to frame his enemy, is what he did. The polling and focus group research, again, they found that MAGA was already viewed negatively by voters, more negatively than other phrases like Trump Republicans, for example. Now, they said this: in battleground areas, more than twice as many voters said they would be less likely to vote for someone called a MAGA Republican. So, in other words, if Biden says MAGA Republican, if he uses that that slogan to frame his political enemies, MAGA Republican, that people would be about twice as less likely to vote for someone under that label. And so Biden wanted to use that slogan, MAGA Republican, and the more strong one they came up with, which was Ultra MAGA, to try to win elections. And in Biden's newest speech, he talks, but he dropped Ultra MAGA because it kind of backfired and people actually liked it. He used and said MAGA Republican because his focus group found that that's what could win him elections. Now, Biden's speech in Independence Hall was not branded a political event. This was not technically, his re-election campaign, even though he's probably trying to use it as such. What he was giving was an official speech as part of his administration, meaning it was a policy speech. But in that policy speech, he's using the information he's gotten from his researchers and this focus group, saying that if they frame their enemies as MAGA Republicans, that's going to win them elections. Now, it says the focus group also found the description tapped into the broader agreement among voters that the Republican Party had become more extreme and power-hungry in recent years. And of course, Biden capitalized on all three of those points. One, using the phrase MAGA Republican, and two, framing the Republican Party as extreme and power-hungry, making them out to be an extremist group that is against the very basic ideas that America was founded on, as again he's standing in front of Independence Hall, where the ideas of America were founded. Now, CAP Action Fund, the group he brought in, and its president and executive director, Navin Naik, told the Post, all of that extremism gets captured in the brand being MAGA Republican. Adding the versatile epithet applies to every political issue, including abortion and climate change. We're not trying to create a new word. This is how they define themselves. Now, what did Biden also say in his speech? He says it includes anyone who challenges the way elections are run. So if you were to challenge the way that elections are run, if you don't believe in the loosening of the election systems, if you don't believe in access to everyone, for, voting rights, as they call it, then you're a MAGA Republican. You're an extremist. And they say, Biden also said, for example, that if you have a failure to acknowledge when elections were won or lost, kind of like Democrats in 2016 for 4 years, right? When they claimed that Trump rigged the election by colluding with Russia, ironically that was based on a false narrative that they themselves financed and spread, the Democrat Party and the Clinton campaign. They did what Biden's accusing others of doing, but Biden is now framing that as being an extremist idea. That if you challenge the way elections are run, or if you have a failure to acknowledge when elections were won or lost, like Hillary Clinton in 2016 and like the entire Democrat Party through all of Trump's term, then you're an extremist. But of course, they're trying to pretend that history doesn't exist, and only going forward, they're claiming that Trump, by even questioning the elections, is challenging the integrity of our election system. That it goes against the very ideas of democracy and the republic, right, a democratic republic, constitutional republic on which we are built. Technically, you call it a representative democracy, right? That's what a republic is. I'm going to show you a bit more of this because he goes a bit further on this. Let me show you a video again. This is Twitter breaking 911. And Biden says, I will not stand by and watch elections in this country stolen by people who simply refuse to accept that they lost. Sound familiar, like the entire 2016 narrative and all through Trump's presidency, but this is them now. Let me show you what Biden is saying. We play this clip.
Democracy cannot survive when one side believes there are only two outcomes to an election. Either they win or they were cheated. And that's where the MAGA Republicans are today. They don't understand what every patriotic American knows, You can't love your country only when you win. It's fundamental. American democracy only works only if we choose to respect the rule of law and the institutions that were set up in this chamber behind me. Only if we respect our legitimate political differences. I will not stand by and watch. The will of the American people be overturned by wild conspiracy theories and baseless evidence-free claims of fraud. I will not stand by and watch elections in this country stolen by people who simply refuse to accept that they lost.
Well, of course, he stole the election. And so it's very normal that he would try to challenge people who say that. But of course, what he's saying is that he will not stand by and watch as people, again, question the election and people, people claim the election was stolen. He will not stand by and watch as that happens. So what does he plan to do? Well, again, he's saying he has the full force of his system behind him. He has the tools in his hands to take action against that system. Now, what is he planning to do? We don't know yet. But his speech, again, suggested that he's planning to take some kind of action against people who question the outcome of elections. Again, it's very bizarre because all through again, 2016 when Trump won the election, it was the other side. It was Biden and, of course, the Democrats who were on the other side claiming that Trump stole the election. And now they're trying to frame that narrative, the one where people are on the streets protesting and wearing their pink hats or burning down neighborhoods and protesting. They're trying to claim that just kind of never happened, that doesn't exist because, at the time they did not accept that they lost. They would not acknowledge Trump as being legitimate president. They had the slogan, "Not my president." They tried to appoint, they did appoint investigative committees. They appointed a special counsel to try to remove Trump from office, all based on disinformation that they themselves spread, which was the Trump-Russia dossier. They financed and then spread. And then their media questioned the integrity of the Trump presidency the entire time of his office based on the disinformation they spread. Now, he's saying you can't only love your country when, your party wins, not those exact words. But if you remember when Trump was still president, it was his side that did not love this country or love what it stood for. So why is it that he's basically accusing others of what he and his party did during the entire 4 years of Trump's presidency? And now he's trying to frame what they did and what the Republicans now are doing as being extreme and a threat to the American system, and so extreme that he's suggesting he plans to do something using the tools they have in their hands. Folks, I'm going to go deeper into this, but let's jump exclusively over to Epic TV for the rest of this. Again, we are currently banned on YouTube for the next 2 weeks. We are posting on the Epic TV YouTube channel. In the meantime, YouTube gave us a strike for doing the thing that Biden said you can't do. Which is, we actually had an interview with Dinesh D'Souza, and Dinesh D'Souza talking about his documentary, which I can't even name on YouTube, which is why we're jumping over to Epic TV. They retroactively, I assume the AI system didn't pick it up, and so they probably had a human researcher go and check it. But they've given us a strike, and we're banned for 2 weeks on YouTube. So let's jump exclusively to Epic TV, where I can say everything I want to say. Not worry about that. So folks, let's jump over now. But first, let me show you a quick trailer. We had an interview recently on how the media political system is fueling riots and gaslighting America. It was an interview with Julio Rosas. Let me show you that, then we'll jump over.
Immediately they called it a riot. And then we've taken it a step further, right? They're calling it an insurrection. And then you look back at what they were calling Antifa attacking a federal courthouse for a month in Portland, and they were calling that a protest.
What is the political system behind this? We see all the noise. What's the goal of this?
Charlottesville was really the one where the media really went in and hammered Trump on it, saying that it was his fault, he was stoking all of that. And that really set the tone for kind of the rest of the presidency in terms of taking things out of context of stuff that he said, not acknowledging all the times when he's going to denounce these things. And this is going into 2020. No lessons were learned from that.
Yeah, folks, an interview that has become more relevant because that interview was about how Democrats and their Antifa and BLM, troops, stormtroopers, went around basically protesting, burning down buildings, killing people, establishing a Chaz site, which was an actual insurrection where they declared a part of Seattle was an independent country, established their own rules, their own mob rule, raided the police department, stole firearms, distributed firearms on the street, shot and killed people, and it really did this whole thing. It was absolutely ridiculous. That is not being framed as extreme, though. What's being framed as extreme is supporting the ideas of Make America Great Again. And, of course, now questioning the outcome of the election. Folks, that said, again, we'll jump over exclusively to Epic TV. I'm always walking a fine line with YouTube, so I will see you on Epic TV. Click the link in the description. Join us over there, and we'll see you there. All right.